Hey, welcome to another episode of the DTC Insider podcast. I'm Roisentul, your host, and today I'm going to interview Dan Brady. He's the customer success manager at Pura Vida bracelets. He's not only that, but also an experienced customer success professional who specializes in DTC, and he has over 7 years of experience in driving customer satisfaction, retention, and loyalty for some of the most innovative and successful brands in the industry. It's a pleasure to have you on. Hey, Dan, thanks for being on the show.
Hey Brian, thanks so much for having me. I've long admired, yourself in the podcast, and I'm really honored to be speaking with you here today.
Yeah, thank you, man. So, why don't you start by telling the audience more about you and your story?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm originally an East Coast guy. I'm from Massachusetts. I've happily lived in California now for about the last 8 years. Growing up in Massachusetts, I went to school out there. I played college soccer. And when I was in university, I really, really wanted to work in professional sports. That was kind of a dream of mine. And I was hoping to become maybe like an athletic director. And so I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was in college. And so immediately after I kind of went and I was in graduate school, again, aspiring to work in some type of athletics, college athletics, professional sport. And as I was wrapping up school, I had this realization. I was like, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. Like these are crazy hours, not great work-life balance. Like this is not what I wanted to do. And so I actually dropped out of grad school, just 6 credits shy of earning a master's degree. I decided I'm going to completely pivot my career path. This is not what I want to do. And I basically packed up my car, drove cross country back in 2015, and again, I've been happily living in California now for the past 8 years. When I first got out to California, I started my career in sales, all types of miscellaneous sales jobs, and I didn't love what I was doing. And so I eventually transitioned from sales into CX. And I guess the rest is history. I started entry level and worked my way up through the ranks. And then eventually, back in 2020, I joined Pura Vida as customer success manager. I've been here almost 3 years now, and just super happy to be working in customer experience. I think it's a wonderful industry, and it just really matches what my skill sets and ambitions are all about.
Awesome. Well, that's a great story, actually. And I can relate to that because when I was younger, I was into sports, mainly into soccer here in Argentina. And I was super happy. And then there was a time in my life, a point in which, you need to decide what you're going to do with the future. So I can relate with what you were saying. So I know that, and this is actually not the first time I mentioned that in the show. And it's that sports have a lot in common with business, right? And I know you have a strong background in sports, so I wonder if you find any similarities between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. Having played Division 3 soccer myself, and then I went on to coach 2 years of college soccer as well. Sports are a big passion of mine, and again, while I didn't make a career out of it, I do think that a lot of the learnings that I've taken from playing sports and coaching sports and being around sports has really translated well into the business world, right? There's so many similarities as far as being a manager of a team or being a coach of a team. It's really about leading people, right? And how do you effectively do that? You have to incentivize them, you have to lead them, you have to coach them, right? And even coaching in itself, the way you manage people or coach people, people are so different. Some people need you to wrap your arm around them and positively and reinforce them and hold their hand. And other people, you might have to be a little bit more harsh on, right? So it's kind of like everyone needs to be managed or coached a little bit differently. And what I would say as far as like business again is just like building a team. I think so much of it comes down to having a successful culture, right? And how do you build a successful culture? I think the Miami Heat are like a great example of that, right? They're not my favorite team. I'm a Celtics fan, but the Heat, they're known for having Heat culture. And like, what is that all about? It's about, everyone's super competitive. Everyone buys into the mission and the vision of the team. And so I just think that for me, one of the things in my life, in my experience, that's set me up for success in business and managing people is my background in athletics and, being competitive and understanding how people are different and how to drive and motivate them. And ultimately, the end goal is always the same, and that's to win, right? So Absolutely, there's a lot of similarity between sport and business. And again, I didn't make a career out of sport, but I've certainly taken a lot of learnings from playing sports and working in sports, and have been able to apply that in customer experience.
Yeah, I think you get a lot of skills when you practice sports that are not even related to the discipline itself, to the sport itself. And it's actually I mean, having the discipline, having a routine, not working alone, working with your team, right? Uh, Taking decisions and winning, losing, planning for the long term, for the short term. There are many lessons that we all learn when we practice sports. And the other day, I was in fact talking with a founder in the DTC space, and he sadly had some issues with some of his co-founders and team members, and he said something that it's very aligned with what you're saying. He said, "You know what? Somebody told me," he said, "that when your team is not like family. A lot of people say, oh, I love my partners and my team members as family. Well, they are not family. If you look at things like you do in sports, if you say, hey, we are a team, we are a sports team, we are not a family, you need to perform, right? You need
Right.
to have a structure, you need to have roles, right, to achieve the greater goal. And if you
Mhm.
don't perform, then you might be great, but if you don't perform, you need to be in the bench or worse,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
there are many things that could be, many similarities, I think, between the two. So that's great.
Absolutely. And, even on an individual basis, I think a lot of people who go on to have great success in their careers are former athletes, right? And just on an individual basis, you're talking about when I'm looking at potential candidates and their former student athletes, I know that they have a great work ethic. I know that they're used to being on a team. I know that they're coachable. I know that, they have a winning mentality, and there's just so many similarities. And so I think on an individual basis and on a team basis, there's a lot of learnings from sport that you can absolutely apply in business. And another one too, tying back into the culture, is like nobody is above the team. It doesn't matter if you're LeBron James or you're Lionel Messi, right? I know you're Argentinian. Nobody is above the team, and you have to accept that. Hey, being part of a team, you have to be selfless. And you have to think about the greater cause and the greater good. And it's never just about you, it's about, the team as a whole.
Yeah. Talk about teams. Why didn't you tell me and the audience more about yours?
Yeah, definitely. So I proudly manage an outsourced team in the Philippines. We use a great outsourced partner called Awesome CX. They work with a lot of wonderful D2C brands. And I've had the great pleasure of working with this team again for almost 3 years now. And, it's a little bit unusual, I would say, for myself to be the only internal CX person at Pura Vida managing a team of 23 people in the Philippines. But what I'd say is we have an outstanding team, and they really do a heck of a job. We've worked with this group for almost 5 years now, and I think one of the major keys for our success has been having very, very little turnover and also high morale, right? Our average tenure for our leadership members is actually over 4 years. Our average tenure for our team members as a whole is over 3 years. And what I find is that, with great experience, you know, the team members have seen a lot of different scenarios over the years. They're very comfortable and familiar with all the different case handlings and resolutions and who our customers are. And, we have such passionate and avid fans. And I just think that one of the keys to being a successful CS leader and having a great CS team or CX team is really it makes jobs so much more difficult when you're dealing with high turnover and you're constantly having to hire, interview, train, onboard new people. I think there was a recent study that shows it takes 8 months for an employee to get fully up to speed and productive. And so if you're constantly having turnover, it becomes extremely difficult to maintain that high level of CSAT and, NPS scores and all the metrics that CX leaders are looking for. Why? Because, you're spending more time backfilling roles and training than you are actually focusing on, hey, how can we improve this customer experience? And so I know we've talked about it in the preparation leading up to this interview, but I think outsourcing so often gets a bad rap in kind of D2C and just like the CX community as a whole. I feel like every now and then you'll see like a viral post online about someone who's outsourcing, and they're saying how little they pay their outsourced partners. And I just think that it's an industry that sometimes gets a negative light shed on it, but when done correctly and with the right vendors, I think that outsourcing can really help elevate your customer experience and also just your business as a whole.
Yeah, I think that um, one, I think like you can see outsourcing as the ingredients to a meal, right? The ingredients might be the same, but I might have one person cooking and prepping a meal, and somebody else. One could be delicious, and the other one probably you better stop eating it right away, right? The ingredients might be the same. So the same is saying Facebook ads don't work, Google ads don't work, outsourcing doesn't work. It didn't work for you. Like dating doesn't work, right? Because you had that bad experience. So in this case, it's the same thing. So I think that, yeah,
And yeah, something I want to add is like in my previous role before Pura Vida, we worked with several different outsourcing partners. And I've seen kind of the other side of things where maybe your outsourcing partners, you don't have a super close relationship with the people you're managing. I hate to say it, but maybe some brands might treat them more like a number than an actual person. And again, yeah, I think that people who maybe have never outsourced could have opinions that are just based on what they've heard. Others, maybe to your point, have had a bad experience with a BPO, and that kind of, influences their opinion on the industry as a whole. But not only like our BPO, who is fantastic. I know there's other BPOs that I have a lot of respect for as well, because ultimately, regardless of where you're located, right, whether it's the Philippines, South Africa, Colombia, Canada, near shore, offshore, yeah, down in South America, it's really just about making sure that you're paying people a livable wage, that you're giving them great incentives, you're treating them well, you're giving them bonuses, you're giving them room to grow. And something that I think, honestly, the thing I'm most proud about in my time here at Pura Vida is having a positive influence on our team members and helping them develop new skills and knowledge and getting them promotions and really helping them, not only support themselves, but their families. So yeah, I know outsourcing can be maybe something that people shy away from talking about or don't always have the strongest viewpoint on in a positive way. But again, I think that when done correctly with the right partners, you can really find great success.
yeah, and I think there's a shift in the market, right? Because brands with the recession, inflation, and all the macroeconomics and socioeconomics things that are going on, right? I think that many brands I talk to are looking with better eyes to, I mean, having fractional resources, right? You call it outsourcing, I call it outsourcing too, but another name is, the fractional resource.
Mhm.
Sometimes it could be like a fractional resource in the same country, in the same city, but sometimes it could be overseas as well,
Mhm.
you know? And I think as everything, as we discussed already, there are, the great ones, the good ones, and the bad ones,
Mhm.
as in everything. And I think there's, I mean, that at least from my point of view, I see that there's a shift in, having less headcount and having more outsourced or fractional,
Yeah,
department.
and what I would say is like, we're located in San Diego. This is one of the most expensive cities to live in the entire country. And with our budget, if I had to bring on an in-house team, it would be a nightmare. I mean, one, we would have maybe a quarter of the number of total people. And also, it's really hard to pay people a livable wage in customer experience in an expensive city like this. And I just think it would be extremely high turnover, low morale. My experience with in-house teams is often that people use CX as a stepping stone to try and move into other departments within the organization. Not always the case. And that's not to say that CX is not a great industry to be in, because obviously I feel differently. But my experience generally with in-house is that you don't pay people well enough for them to want to make a career out of it. And they ultimately end up either wanting to switch into a different department, or they don't stick around long enough for their time to maybe be worthwhile. And so for us having obviously every company only has so many resources available. For us, outsourcing has allowed us to have far more people, which allows far more channels, greater response times, and, ultimately happier customers at the end of the day.
Awesome. We are talking about customer success, but I just wanted to ask you, what does it really mean? What does it include? What does it, represent? Because many times people confuse it with some other terms, right? But
Mhm.
yeah, I will let you take it from there, probably.
It's a good question, because even like my title is customer success manager. And, I think the term customer success, like if you go back 10 years ago, like it didn't really exist, right? And so I think there's been a shift where everything used to be just like customer service or customer support, which is a part of customer success, right? But when you think about customer success, there's so much more that goes into it, right? And so I think it's obviously both applicable for, software, right? Like SaaS, as well as just like D2C and selling physical goods. But it ultimately comes down to like support is a part of success. Like you can support or service a customer by answering inquiries or kind of and answering inquiries is really it at its core, like the simplest way to describe support or service. But like success is like showing people how to use the products or services or software to really achieve greater results and outcomes. And success is really more like long-term focused. It's not transactional. It really kind of has the customer's journey in mind, right? So it's not just like a quick transactional, like, hey, where is my order? But it's really like, hey, like let's make sure that this customer knows how to use the product. Jewelry might be a little bit more simple, but like a good example would be makeup, right? There's a lot of great makeup brands out there. And if customers don't know how to correctly apply the makeup or use the makeup or beauty products, they might not find great success with it, right? And so that's a problem because if customers don't know how to use it properly, they might not shop again. They might have lower AOV, they might have lower customer lifetime values, and so I think success is really just kind of knowing how to like make sure that your customers are aware how to maximize the product or service or software. And if it's a product, like knowing how to actually use it correctly. Another example is like supplements, right? Supplements is a huge booming industry, and there's so many great supplement brands out there. If customers don't know how to correctly, use the products and they don't see the results that they're hoping for, oh, this collagen doesn't work, or oh, these vitamins stink. Well, maybe you're not using them correctly. And so I think success is really just it's much larger picture, it's more long term, and it's about making sure your customers are set up for success so that hopefully, they're returning and referring friends and just kind of overall helping your business.
So we could say, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's not only the support, but there are many ways actually the brands can leverage the customer success department, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, success is not just limited to like customer service, right? Like when I think about myself and my role as customer success manager, yes, obviously I'm measured on the KPIs from a service perspective. Hey, what's your average response time, resolution times, CSAT, customer effort score, like all that good stuff. But I'm also responsible for making sure that I'm communicating with our e-commerce manager about our website. Hey, is our website easy to navigate? Can customers check out easily both on mobile, tablets, desktop, Google, whatever browser you're using? Is checkout easy? Is it like frictionless? How's our conversion rate looking, right? And it's obviously so much more, right? I'm constantly talking to like our product development team about, hey, especially as we're introducing new items, new collections, right? Like this year alone, we've just launched men's jewelry, for example, and making sure that like the feedback for these new products is being communicated so that when we're creating future products, we're always keeping the customer in mind, right? And so yeah, a lot of my job is not just the support aspect, right, which is one of the main responsibilities, of course, but there's so much more that goes into it in communicating with e-commerce, product, marketing, acquisition, management, finance. Like the customers are what drive the business, and everything we do should be with the customers preferences in mind, right? And so I'm constantly communicating with other departments to make sure that we never lose sight of what's most important for our business and any business, and that's obviously the customer in making sure that they're successful.
Yes. And there are, many phases in the sales funnel. You mentioned a few, the acquisition, the retention, but there's the activation, the engagement. And you said, for example, how the customer success department can help with the activation. They got this product, but they don't know how to use it. So not only the content, but the customer success department can help them use it. And I cannot even imagine how important this is when you have a recurring purchase, such as a subscription, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I know we talked about this. One thing with Pura Vida is we do offer monthly subscriptions, right? We have a bracelet club and a jewelry club, and it's a huge part of our business. We have thousands and thousands of subscribers. And, what we know about these customers is if you're subscribing to our product, right, recurring every month, like you're a pretty avid fan. So not only is the expectation that you're going to be spending likely hundreds of dollars on the subscription, but you're also going to be making one-time purchases and hopefully thinking about our brand when it comes to special occasions, right? Birthdays, graduations, anniversaries, etc. So the subscription is a huge part of our business because not only are we guaranteed to have like recurring orders every month and we have to do our best to, you know, deliver on expectations and hopefully even exceed those expectations for these customers. But what we know about these subscribed customers is they have higher lifetime customer values. They're more likely to refer us, to friends and family. They have higher NPS scores, which in itself, translates generally to, happier customers who are returning more often. And so yeah, it's a huge responsibility, and just making sure that everything is running smoothly with the subscriptions. Because again, it's not just one; we have two separate subscriptions, and a lot of avid customers who really look forward to receiving their bracelets or jewelry every month.
Do you guys feel feed the customer the marketing department as well with the insights you
Yeah.
get?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the marketing team is very much aware of all the feedback we get. And the same can be said for really like the product team, right? Because one thing that's unique about our monthly club subscriptions is that the products sold on there are like exclusive. You can't just go on the website and buy them as a one-time purchase. So what does that mean? These products are unique, and it's our job to make sure that we're constantly pushing out cool new products that people are excited about, right? So the moment we get any constructive feedback, like, hey, these bracelets are looking kind of similar at this point, or there's not enough variety, or we would prefer X, Y, and Z. Like, of course, we're going to take that feedback to heart. And when we're creating these new products moving forward, we always want to make sure that our customers are excited about what's next to come, and that, these exclusive bracelets or jewelry is really something that they look forward to.
Right. Awesome. And going back to what you said before about outsourcing the customer success department, I know there are
Mhm.
many brands out there that might do it to, save money, and that's okay, or for some other reasons. But I know there are many brands struggling right now, and it's like the egg and the chicken dilemma, right? They don't have enough money to have a customer success department, but they don't have a customer success department because it's like, so they are losing money. They don't have enough money because they're losing customers as well because they don't have a great customer success department, right? So
Mhm.
that's what I want to say. So what advice could you give them for them to be able to get started? Or that would be one thing, and the other one that it's related is what what do you think they should have in place? Maybe processes, scripts, or anything else for them to succeed with outsourcing the customer success department.
Yeah, well, what I would say is I think when you look at Pura Vida, we're a company that's about 13 years old, and we've been outsourcing for like almost the last 5 or 6 years, right? So in the early stages of the business, this was in-house, and eventually it just got to a point where, the payroll is only increasing. You have an internal team, and again, we talked about living in an expensive city where it's very difficult to scale a CX team. So when we first started outsourcing, granted I was not around at that time, but just general tips from what I've heard in my experience, managing the team currently is I think it's really important that when you first start outsourcing, one, of course, identify the right partners and make sure when you're shopping for software, I don't think many companies ever say, hey, find the cheapest solution. Why? Because, you get what you pay for. Obviously, you're not really going to see a great value if you're paying for the cheapest solution possible. So the first thing I would recommend if you're starting to outsource is identify the right partners, right? And yeah, obviously, don't necessarily look for the cheapest option because it probably won't end well, right? So choose the right partners. And how do you identify the right partners? I think having the right culture is super important, and kind of like we talked about earlier, making sure that you find a partner that really treats your people well, right? And so like our outsourcing partner, you go to their offices and it looks like something you'd see at a Silicon Valley. Like it looks like Google, it's just a beautiful modern office with, water fountains, rock climbing walls, like furniture, nap pods, like free snacks, free coffee, like beautiful views. And more importantly, they pay people a livable wage. And like the way my team members describe it is like a steady corporate job, and it's something that they can do long term and support their families. So that was pretty long-winded, but I'd say the first thing is identify the right partners and really keep the culture in mind, because culture is going to give you, high retention rates, and people will obviously be happy to work with you. So choosing the right partner, I think, is important. And then what I'd also say is in the early stages, make sure that the people you're bringing on early are ones who hopefully can grow with the brand and develop into leaders. And so on our team, all of our team leaders now started entry level and were able to climb up their ranks. And now, they're people who have been with us 4 or 5 years, great deal of experience, and they make my job a heck of a lot easier. And I think, whether you're managing an outsourced team or an in-house team, I think it's very, very similar as far as, hey, you have to make sure that you're offering room for growth. You have to make sure that you're paying people well. You have to offer good incentives. You have to take care of them very well, and just make sure that, in customer experience, sometimes it can be a little bit repetitive by nature, right? Because we always have to make sure that we're answering customer inquiries, and that's the first and foremost, most important thing that you're kind of doing. But make sure that you're giving them other meaningful things to work on, and, side projects to work on, and, focusing on like their development, not just like, hey, answer these chats, answer these emails, answer these social, inquiries. Like make sure that you're giving them rewarding and fulfilling things so that ultimately you can kind of keep them happily employed for a long period of time, and, keep that turnover low and retention high.
That's awesome. I love it. And going back to something we discussed in the beginning, aligned with something you just said, I think that you I don't know if it's something that happens to all of us, but I think that I can imagine that many people treat the same way their outsourced team than their internal team, meaning that if you treat your outsourced team in a bad way, as you said in the beginning, you're probably doing kind of the same thing with the internal team. Probably you give them a little bit more of love because you see them face to face. But
Mhm.
if that's who you are, it talks more about you than about them, right? So if you
Yep.
have a healthy culture, if you have good processes and things work well in-house, it's great that you have the same, let's say, way to addressing things with the
Yeah,
outsourced
and
team.
something too, I think going back to your question about like how to set up a successful outsourced team, I will say that it's very important to spend time with them in person as well. And so like one of the highlights of my time with Pura Vida has been, trips out to the Philippines and spending time with the team. And, while I look at and admire other departments who maybe have like quarterly social events and they're going out for happy hour, like going bowling or, going out and doing fun things, picnics. I go out and visit the team as often as I can, and we're cramming in all the social stuff into like a week. So we're going to the movies, we're bowling, we're going out for breakfast, lunch, dinner. We're island hopping, we're spending time. So it is very important, I think, in any relationship, whether it's in-house, outsourced, or even vendors. It's just the power of spending time with people, and developing those relationships really kind of, it helps, because as much as we as professionals and like in the business world, like, yeah, we're all here to ultimately, collect a check, support our families, support ourselves. You want to be working with people who, you get along well with, and people who you respect. And you don't have to be best friends, but you do want to have a close relationship and at least mutual respect for one another. So I think it's also important that if you're considering outsourcing, that you're prepared to, go spend some time with your team. It's always a highlight of my year, and I know the team always looks forward to it as well.
Nice. That's great. So, for everyone listening or watching, I hope you enjoyed the episode because it was full of value. I think that if a brand like Pura Vida uses outsource resources for the customer success department, why not you? Especially more in these times, right? I think it's better to give your customers a great service, even if it's outsourced, than not giving them the service because you cannot afford an in-house team, right? So I wanted to thank you for being here in the show, but we are not done yet. I have one more question for you. It's not related to work. I
Okay.
like reading, and I started this section a few years ago, and we put together a list of the books mentioned last year, and we're going to do the same this year because I cannot stop reading the same thing over and over again. So I say, hey, I will ask every guest who comes on the show, what do they read? What book they loved? So maybe I will find my next big one to read. And of course,
Yeah.
the same goes for the audience.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I have to admit, a lot of the books that I'm going to suggest are kind of classic books, and
Course.
they're not ones that are like hidden gems. But some of my favorite include Atomic Habits. I think when I read that book last year, it really kind of changed me as a person, and I just found myself being so much more consistent in like a lot of really important habits, mainly like exercise, taking care of my body, my mind as well. So Atomic Habits was a game changer for me, not only like professionally but personally. I also love Built to Last. That's a great book. I would say Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Again, that's really good, not just for like professional development, but really just kind of becoming a more effective person in your relationships. And the last one is one called Good to Great. So Good to Great is another book that I would highly recommend. That one kind of talks about, it's more, I would say, business and professional focused than personal development. But Good to Great kind of talks about what's the difference between really great companies and just good companies. So definitely recommend.
I love them. So I really love reading about productivity and self-development. So I really love the books they recommended. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah, I have to ask you, out of the four that I've suggested, how many have you read and how many do you hope to read?
I I think I didn't read any. I was going to read Atomic Habits because, of course, I've been told that it's great. But when I read the description, I don't remember the name of the book right now, but I read a similar book. So they were saying, like in the comments, like if you read this one, there's always a review that makes you, buy. Or not buy. So
Yeah.
I read a few of reviews that were saying that it was similar to something else I read. So it was like,
Okay.
okay, if you read this, and that, then probably it's like more of the same. But I will, now that you mentioned it, I gotta read it because it's another excuse for me to do it because I've been into that book for a while now, but I didn't do it because of that reason.
Mhm.
And the Build to Last, I know it. I think I didn't read it. And Good to Great, it rings the bell, but I think I didn't read it. So I'll give it a shot too. So you gave me a good list to check out.
Okay. Cool. Cool. Yeah. Again, these aren't like hidden gems. I think many of your audience has probably heard of most of these, but I found very, very good value in each of them. So hopefully, yourself or others listening do as well.
Awesome. So before you go, let me ask you, where can people go to learn more about you and the company?
Yeah, I mean, I know I shared my LinkedIn URL with you, and feel free to link that to your podcast. So I'm definitely active on LinkedIn and always enjoy connecting with other people in CX and D2C as a whole. And Pura Vida, we're pretty easy to find. We've got a few retail stores throughout the country. You can find us in many wholesale partners, and obviously you can visit our website puravitabracelets.com. And again, the if you just go to Google and type us in, obviously you'll find plenty of different articles and content.
Dan, you've been great. I wanted to thank you again for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I appreciate the opportunity to have been on your podcast.